The photograph had frozen to her fingers by the time she stumbled into Alta, Utah, barely able to see through the swirling snow that seemed determined to bury her alive. Rebecca Ann Ashford clutched the only piece of her past she had left, a faded image of a white farmhouse with green shutters somewhere in Ohio that no longer existed. Her family gone to fever 3 winters ago, and she had been walking for what felt like forever, searching for something she could not name. The mining town of Alta rose before her like a mirage through the blizzard. Wooden buildings huddled together against the December cold of 1879, smoke rising from chimneys promising warmth she desperately needed. Her legs gave out on the main street, and she felt herself falling forward into the snow, the world tilting sideways. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground, and she looked up through ice-crusted eyelashes to see a face that seemed carved from the same rugged mountain surrounding them. Dark eyes met hers with immediate concern, and a voice rough as gravel but somehow gentle asked, "Madam, can you hear me?" Rebecca tried to answer, but her lips would not move properly, frozen and cracked. The man did not wait for a response. He swept her up into his arms as though she weighed nothing and carried her toward the nearest building, shouldering open a door that released a blast of heat. She heard voices, questions, but the man carrying her answered in short, commanding tones that brooked no argument. "Get blankets. Hot water, not boiling. Food, something mild." She was lowered onto something soft, a better couch, and hands began working at her stiffened clothing. A woman's voice joined the man's, older and motherly, making soothing sounds. Rebecca realized she was still clutching the photograph and tried to hold it tighter, but her fingers would not cooperate. "It's all right," the man said, and she felt him gently prying her fingers open. "I'll keep it safe, I promise." Something about his voice made her believe him, and she let go, let the darkness take her. When she woke, she was in a proper bed with quilts piled high, and weak winter sunlight filtered through a window. Her body ached everywhere, a deep bone cold that had not yet released its grip. She turned her head slowly and saw her photograph propped on a small table beside the bed, carefully positioned where she would see it immediately upon waking. That small gesture brought tears to her eyes. The door opened, and the woman she had heard before entered, carrying a tray. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked brown hair and a kind face lined by mountain weather. "You're awake. Good. I'm Martha Jennings. You're in my boarding house, such as it is. My nephew Zachary found you in the street yesterday." "Yesterday?" Rebecca's voice came out as a croak. "You've been sleeping near 20 hours. Your body needed it." Martha set the tray down and helped Rebecca sit up, propping pillows behind her. "Think you can manage some broth?" Rebecca nodded, and Martha handed her a cup. The liquid was hot and rich, beef broth with herbs, and it was the most wonderful thing she had ever tasted. She drank slowly, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "What's your name, child?" Rebecca Ashford." "Where were you headed, Rebecca Ashford, walking through a blizzard like that?" Rebecca looked at the photograph. "I don't know. Anywhere. Nowhere. I just needed to leave where I was." Martha's expression softened with understanding. Running from something or toward something? Both. Neither. Rebecca felt fresh tears threaten. "My family is gone. The farm went to creditors. I worked in Cleveland for a while, in a factory, but the conditions were awful, and the foreman—" She trailed off, not wanting to explain the man's wandering hands, his implications that she could make her situation easier if she was friendly. "I left. I heard there were opportunities out west. I had some money saved, but it ran out in Wyoming. I've been walking for 2 weeks, taking odd jobs where I could find them." 2 weeks? Martha's face showed alarm. "In this weather?" "I had to keep moving. If I stopped, I thought I might never start again." Martha patted her hand. "Well, you've stopped now, and you'll stay stopped until you're properly recovered. No arguments. Alta's not much, just a mining town, but we take care of our own, and anyone who needs help is our own. Over the next 3 days, Rebecca slowly regained her strength. Martha brought her meals and sat with her, telling her about Alta, how it had sprung up around the silver mines, how it was rough but honest, how most of the men who came here were looking for a fresh start, just like she was. The boarding house had 6 rooms, all currently occupied by miners who worked the Emma mine up the canyon. On the 4th day, Rebecca was finally strong enough to come downstairs. Martha lent her a dress as Rebecca's own clothes had been too damaged by her journey to salvage. The dress was simple brown wool, a bit large but serviceable. Rebecca braided her dark blonde hair, wishing she had a mirror to check her appearance, and made her way carefully down the narrow stairs. The main floor held a dining room with a long table and a parlor with a wood stove that radiated heat. A man stood by the stove, and Rebecca recognized him immediately, even though she had only glimpsed him through her delirium. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard for his living. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and fell to his collar. He had a strong jaw with a few days' worth of stubble, and those same dark eyes that had looked at her with such concern. He turned when he heard her on the stairs, and his face transformed with a smile that made him suddenly, devastatingly handsome. "Miss Ashford, it's good to see you on your feet." "Mr. Jennings, I owe you my life, thank you." "Zachary," he corrected. "And you don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Rebecca said quietly. "I've learned that not everyone would help." Something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or anger on her behalf. "Then you've met the wrong people. Out here we look after each other. Have to. The mountains don't care about your problems, and winter even less." Martha bustled in from the kitchen. "Good. You're both here. Zachary, Rebecca's going to need work if she's staying in Alta. And before you say anything, Rebecca, you are staying until spring at the earliest. I won't hear of you traveling in winter. Now, Zachary runs the general store and has been complaining about needing help since his last clerk left for the California goldfields." Zachary shot his aunt an exasperated look that suggested this ambush had been planned, but he did not seem truly upset. "I could use help. The store's gotten busier than I can manage alone. It's not exciting work, mostly keeping inventory, helping customers, basic bookkeeping. The pay isn't much, but it includes a room, and you'd take your meals here with us." Rebecca felt hope rise in her chest, something she had not felt in months. "I can read and write. I'm good with figures. I worked in my father's store before he died." "Then you're overqualified," Zachary said with another of those transforming smiles. "The job's yours if you want it. Fair warning, though, miners aren't always the most refined customers. Some of them forget their manners after months in the mountains." "I can handle rough manners. I worked in a factory." "Remember?" His expression darkened slightly. "That you won't have to handle. Any man who's disrespectful doesn't get served. My store, my rules." There was something protective in his tone that warmed Rebecca more than the stove. She found herself smiling back at him. "Then I accept. Thank you. Truly." The store was a 10-minute walk from the boarding house down Alta's main street. It was larger than Rebecca expected, a 2-story building with living quarters above and the shop below. The interior smelled of wood, tobacco, coffee, and 100 other things. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from mining supplies to fabric to canned goods. A counter ran along one side with a cash register that looked new and expensive. Zachary showed her around, explaining the inventory system, where different supplies were kept, how he tracked orders. He had a neat, organized mind, Rebecca discovered. Everything had its place and purpose. As he talked, she found herself watching him, noticing the way his hands moved expressively, how his voice deepened when he was explaining something he cared about, the small scar on his left eyebrow that suggested an old injury. "You're not from Alta originally," she said when he paused. It was not a question. "No, I grew up in Wyoming on a ranch. My father raised horses." He moved to straighten some canned goods that did not need straightening, his back to her. He died 5 years ago. My mother had already passed. I sold the ranch and came here to make a fresh start. Bought this store 3 years ago. No siblings? Two brothers and a sister, all younger. They scattered after the ranch sold. Last I heard, my brothers were in Montana, trying their hand at cattle. My sister married a shopkeeper in Denver, and you chose Alta. He turned back to her, and there was something in his eyes she could not quite read. I chose a place where I could build something of my own, where I could be useful. The miners need supplies, and I provide them. It's simple, honest work. You miss the ranch? Rebecca said softly. Every day. But missing something and being able to keep it are different things. The ranch was dying. My father made some bad investments, borrowed money he couldn't pay back. Selling was the only option. He shook his head as if to clear old ghosts. But that's old history. Let me show you the bookkeeping system. They worked together for the rest of the day, and Rebecca was surprised by how comfortable it felt. Zachary was patient when she had questions, never making her feel foolish. He had a quiet sense of humor that emerged in dry comments about various customers and their peculiarities. When miners came in, Rebecca watched how he interacted with them, friendly but professional, and they respected him. She noticed that he extended credit carefully to men he knew were honest, keeping track in a leather-bound ledger. One miner, a grizzled man named Pete Sullivan, tried to argue about a bill. "That's too high, Irwin. You're gouging me." "The prices are posted, Pete. Same for everyone. If you think it's too high, you're welcome to walk to Salt Lake City for your supplies." Pete grumbled, but paid. On his way out, he noticed Rebecca. "Who's the girl?" "My new clerk, Miss Ashford. She'll be helping in the store." Pete looked her over in a way that made Rebecca stiffen, but there was no real disrespect in it, just curiosity. "Welcome to Alta, Miss Ashford. Don't let these miners give you trouble. They're rough but mostly harmless." "Mostly?" Zachary repeated dryly after Pete left. "That's about the best endorsement Alta can offer." As the days passed into weeks, Rebecca settled into a routine. She worked in the store from morning until evening, learning the business, getting to know the regular customers. The miners accepted her presence with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but none of them caused trouble, perhaps because Zachary's warning about disrespect had spread. She took her meals at the boarding house with Martha and whichever miners were not on shift. In the evenings, she and Zachary often worked together on bookkeeping, sitting at the counter while snow fell outside and the stove kept them warm. She learned more about him in those quiet hours. He read constantly, everything he could get his hands on, and had a shelf of books in his living quarters that he lent to her freely. He had strong opinions about politics, particularly about mining regulations and workers' rights. He believed in fairness and honest dealing in keeping one's word. He never spoke down to her or treated her as less capable because she was a woman. When she had ideas about the store, he listened and often implemented them. Rebecca found herself watching for him, listening for his footsteps, finding excuses to be near him. She noticed everything: how he took his coffee black, how he rubbed his left shoulder when it ached from an old injury, how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he really smiled, how he always held doors for her and carried anything heavy without being asked. She noticed how other women in Alta looked at him and felt an unfamiliar twist of jealousy. One evening in early February, they were closing the store when Zachary said casually, "There's a dance next Saturday. The Miners Association puts one on once a month. Would you like to go?" Rebecca's heart jumped. "With you?" "Well, I was hoping you wouldn't make me dance alone. That would be awkward." His tone was light, but she saw something uncertain in his eyes, as though her answer mattered more than he wanted to show. "Yes," she said, perhaps too quickly. "I'd like that." His smile was bright enough to light the dim store. "Good. That's good." The dance was held in the largest building in Alta, a warehouse that had been cleared and decorated with bunting and lanterns. Most of the town turned out, miners and their families. the few shopkeepers and their wives, the boarding house residents. Someone had brought a fiddle, another a guitar, and a third miner proved surprisingly talented on a harmonica. The music was lively, the atmosphere cheerful, a brief escape from the hard reality of mountain winter. Zachary called for Rebecca at the boarding house, and Martha fussed over them like a proud mother. Rebecca wore a dress Martha had helped her sew from fabric in the store, deep green with a fitted bodice and full skirt. It was the nicest thing she had owned in years. Zachary wore dark trousers and a white shirt under his coat, his hair neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. They walked to the dance side by side, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Inside, the warehouse was transformed. The lanterns cast warm light, the stove at one end pumped out heat, and the music pulled people to the makeshift dance floor. Zachary led Rebecca through the crowd, greeting people, introducing her to those she had not yet met. She felt proud to be beside him, aware of the approving looks they received. When the music shifted to a waltz, Zachary turned to her. "May I?" Rebecca placed her hand in his, felt his other hand settle at her waist, and let him guide her into the dance. He was a good dancer, confident and smooth, and she followed his lead easily. They moved together naturally, and Rebecca felt something shift between them, an awareness that had been building but was now impossible to ignore. "You're full of surprises," she said. "Where did a rancher's son learn to waltz?" "My mother insisted all her children learn proper manners and dancing. She said civilization was what you carried with you, not where you lived." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I'm glad she did. I'd hate to step on your feet. You're doing fine." They danced in silence for a moment, and then Zachary said quietly, "You never talk about what you're running from." "In Cleveland." Rebecca felt her body tense, but she forced herself to relax. "There's not much to tell. The factory was awful, dangerous. Women lost fingers to the machines. The pay was barely enough to live on, and the foreman thought he could take liberties because we were desperate." "Did he hurt you?" "He tried. I hit him with a wrench and left that night." She met Zachary's eyes. "I've been taking care of myself for 3 years, since my family died. I learned to recognize danger and avoid it when I could." "You shouldn't have had to." There was anger in his voice, but not directed at her. "A woman alone, it's not right that you had to face that. The world doesn't care much about right and wrong. It just is." "Maybe, but that doesn't mean we can't try to make it better. To be better." He pulled her slightly closer. "I'm glad you came to Alta. I'm glad I found you that day." "So am I," Rebecca said softly. "I didn't know what I was looking for, but I think I found it anyway." His eyes searched hers. What was that? A place to belong. People who care. A reason to stay. Are those the only reasons? His voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Rebecca's breath caught. Around them, other couples swirled. The music played, but she was aware only of Zachary, of his hands holding her, his eyes locked on hers. "No," she admitted, "not the only reasons." He smiled then, slow and warm and full of promise. "Good." The rest of the dance passed in a blur of music and movement and stolen glances. When Zachary walked her back to the boarding house, they moved slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. At the door, he took both her hands in his. "Rebecca, I know it hasn't been long, just over a month, but I need you to know that what I feel for you, it's not something casual. From the moment I saw you in the snow, holding that photograph like it was the only thing keeping you tethered to the world, I felt something. And every day since, working with you, talking to you, it's only gotten stronger." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I feel it too. I thought maybe I was imagining it or that you were just being kind." "I am kind," he said with a hint of humor. "But that's not why I look for excuses to be near you. That's not why I lie awake at night thinking about you. That's not why the store has never seemed brighter than it does when you're in it." "Zachary." She squeezed his hands. I've been alone for so long. I forgot what it felt like to have someone who cared. But you do care. I can see it every day in 100 small ways. And I care about you. So much it scares me sometimes. Why does it scare you? Because I could lose it, lose you. I've lost everyone I ever loved. He raised one hand to cup her cheek. Life doesn't come with guarantees. I know that. But I also know that hiding from feeling something doesn't protect you. It just makes you lonely. I'd rather take the risk, and I'd like you to take it with me. Yes, Rebecca whispered. Yes. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not want to. His lips met hers gently, a soft kiss that held promise and hope and the beginning of something real. When they parted, Rebecca was breathless, her heart racing. I'll see you tomorrow, Zachary said, his voice rough with emotion. Tomorrow, Rebecca agreed. Spring came slowly to the Utah mountains. The snow began to melt in March, revealing the town beneath in all its muddy, unglamorous reality. But to Rebecca, Alta had never looked more beautiful. She and Zachary courted properly, with walks on Sunday afternoons, dinners at the boarding house with Martha beaming at them, quiet evenings in the store after closing where they talked about everything and nothing. They spoke of their pasts, sharing memories both painful and sweet. Zachary told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's slow descent into debt and despair, about the decision to sell and how it had torn the family apart even as it saved them from ruin. Rebecca told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her parents and two younger siblings, about the fever that took them all within a week, leaving her alone at 19 with nothing but debts and a photograph. Why that photograph? Zachary asked one evening in April as they sat on the bench outside the store, watching the sunset behind the mountains. Why did you hold on to it so tightly? Rebecca pulled the photograph from her pocket. She carried it still, though she no longer needed it the way she once had. Because it was proof that I had belonged somewhere once, that I had been loved, that there had been a place where I was wanted. She looked at him. I don't need it the way I did. I have new proof now. Do you? He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. You make me feel at home. Not the store or Alta or even Martha's boarding house, though I love them all. You. When I'm with you, I feel like I belong, like I'm wanted, like I'm home. Zachary raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. You are home. You're my home too, Rebecca. I didn't realize I was searching for one until I found you in the snow that day. So we both found what we were looking for. Not quite. He turned to face her fully. There's something else I'm looking for, hoping for. Rebecca's heart began to race. What's that? Forever. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I know we haven't been courting long, by conventional standards, 4 months. But I've known since that first dance, maybe since that first moment in the snow, that you were the one I wanted beside me for the rest of my life. Rebecca Ann Ashford, will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple gold, with a small diamond. It was the most beautiful thing Rebecca had ever seen. Yes, she said through tears. Yes, yes, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, while the sun painted the sky gold and pink, and the mountains stood witness to their promise. They married in June of 1880 in a ceremony held outside under the vast Utah sky. Most of Alta attended, even the miners who had no particular religion but appreciated an excuse for celebration. Martha cried happily through the entire ceremony. The circuit preacher who traveled through the mining camps performed the service, and Rebecca wore a dress of white muslin that she and Martha had sewn together, with wildflowers in her hair. Zachary wore his best suit, but it was his expression that Rebecca would remember forever. He looked at her as though she was the answer to every question he had ever asked, the solution to every problem, the fulfillment of every dream. When they exchanged vows, His voice was steady and sure, and she felt the truth of his words settle into her bones. I, Zachary Thomas Irwin, take you, Rebecca Ann Ashford, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, in the hard times and the good. I promise to build you a home where you will always be safe, always be wanted, always belong. I promise to be worthy of the gift you're giving me today, the gift of your trust and your heart. This I swear before God and these witnesses, for as long as I draw breath. Rebecca spoke her own vows through tears of joy, and when the preacher pronounced them married, Zachary kissed her as though sealing a sacred covenant. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and food that the whole town had contributed. Rebecca danced with her new husband, with Martha, with miners who were surprisingly light on their feet, and she felt truly happy for the first time since she could remember. Zachary carried her over the threshold of the living quarters above the store, which they had spent weeks preparing. He set her down gently in what was now their home, decorated with curtains Rebecca had made and furniture they had chosen together. There was a bedroom with a large bed covered in a quilt Martha had given them, a small sitting room with two chairs by the window, a kitchen with a new stove that Zachary had insisted on buying. Welcome home, Mrs. Irwin, he said softly. Rebecca wrapped her arms around his neck. Home, she repeated. I like the sound of that. Their first night together was tender and careful, Zachary patient with her inexperience, both of them learning each other in the most intimate way. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, Rebecca felt a peace she had thought lost forever. She had been alone for so long, had carried her grief and fear like stones in her pockets, weighing her down. But here, in this room, in this moment, with this man, she felt light. She felt free. She felt loved. What are you thinking? Zachary asked, his hand stroking her hair. That I walked through snow, holding a photograph of a home I'd lost. And you gave me a new home to hold. A better one. Not just a place, but a person. A life. A future. He tightened his arms around her. We'll build it together. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore, Rebecca. You'll never be alone again. Neither will you. Neither will I, he agreed. Life in Alta settled into a rhythm. Rebecca and Zachary ran the store together, a true partnership. She handled much of the day-to-day operations, freeing him to manage the supply chains and larger financial decisions. Her suggestions improved their inventory and customer service, and business thrived. They became known as fair dealers, honest and reliable, and miners traveled from neighboring camps to trade with them. The living quarters above the store became a true home. Rebecca decorated with care, finding small touches that made the space warm and welcoming. She planted a small garden in the narrow strip of earth behind the building, growing vegetables and herbs. Zachary built her shelves for books and a desk where she could handle the bookkeeping. They established routines, small rituals that bound them together: morning coffee before opening the store, evening walks after closing, reading aloud to each other before bed. Martha visited often, as did neighbors and friends. Rebecca had never had many female friends, her life too transient and difficult, but in Alta she found a community. The other wives and shopkeepers' daughters welcomed her, taught her about mountain living, shared recipes, and gossip and companionship. She joined a quilting circle that met once a week, and slowly, stitch by stitch, she wove herself into the fabric of the town. In the fall, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after closing the store, nervous despite knowing he would be happy. He proved her right by lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, laughing with pure joy. A baby! We're going to have a baby. He set her down carefully, as though she had suddenly become fragile. Are you all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you still be working in the store? Rebecca laughed at his sudden anxiety. I'm fine. Women have babies all the time while working. I'm not made of glass. I know, but still. You'll tell me if you need anything? if you're tired or uncomfortable. I promise. He knelt in front of her, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. Hello in there. I'm your father. I can't wait to meet you. He looked up at Rebecca with wonder in his eyes. A father. I'm going to be a father. You're going to be wonderful at it. I hope so. I want to give our child everything: security, love, a home where they always feel safe and wanted. You will. We will. Rebecca threaded her fingers through his hair. Together. The pregnancy was not easy. Rebecca suffered from severe nausea in the early months, and as she grew larger, the physical demands of the store became difficult. But Zachary was unfailingly supportive, taking on extra work so she could rest, bringing her tea and toast when the nausea was bad, rubbing her swollen ankles in the evenings. Martha practically moved in during the final month, fussing over Rebecca and preparing everything for the baby's arrival. The baby came in May of 1881, after a long and difficult labor that left Rebecca exhausted but triumphant. Their son was born healthy and squalling, with a strong pair of lungs and his father's dark hair. Zachary cried when the midwife placed the baby in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son with awe. He's perfect. Rebecca, he's absolutely perfect. Rebecca, propped against pillows and bone-tired, smiled. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now looking at their son, Zachary said, James Daniel Irwin, after your father. Rebecca felt tears well up. Her father had been James, a good man who had loved his family and worked himself to death, trying to provide for them. Are you sure? I'm sure. He should carry forward the best of both our families. So James Daniel Irwin entered the world and immediately turned their lives upside down in the best possible way. Rebecca had not known she could love so fiercely, so completely. Every cry, every smile, every tiny change was a miracle. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with James at night when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, talking to his son in a soft, gentle voice that revealed depths of tenderness Rebecca had only glimpsed before. The store remained closed for 2 weeks after James's birth, an unheard of luxury, but one Zachary insisted on. He wanted to be with his wife and son, to help Rebecca recover, to learn the rhythms of their new family. When they did reopen, they rearranged the living quarters so that Rebecca could watch James while working on bookkeeping, and customers quickly became accustomed to the sight of the baby sleeping in a cradle behind the counter. Life continued, days blending into months, months into years. James grew from infant to toddler to child, bright and curious, and loved beyond measure. In 1883, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Catherine, who had her mother's blonde hair and her father's dark eyes. 2 years later came another son, Samuel Thomas, who was quiet, where James was boisterous, thoughtful where Sarah was impulsive. The store expanded, and they eventually bought the building next door, knocking through walls to create more space. They hired help, a young clerk named David, who proved reliable and honest. This freed Rebecca to spend more time with the children, though she remained involved in the business decisions. Zachary trusted her judgment implicitly, and they continued to operate as true partners in every sense. Alta grew as well, becoming more established, more permanent. The mines continued to produce, though the boom years were past. A school was built, and Rebecca served on the board, ensuring that all children, regardless of their parents' station, received an education. A church was erected, and though they were not deeply religious, the Irwin family attended regularly, part of the community fabric. Martha passed peacefully in her sleep in 1885, and Rebecca mourned her deeply. The woman who had been like a mother to her, who had welcomed her when she was a frozen stranger, who had pushed her and Zachary together with loving meddling, was gone. They buried her in the small cemetery outside town, and Rebecca placed wildflowers on the grave every week. But life moved forward, as it always does. The children grew. James showed an aptitude for numbers and a love of books, spending hours in the store helping his father and learning the business. Sarah was adventurous and fearless, climbing trees and racing boys and declaring she would be the first female prospector. Samuel was gentle and artistic, drawing pictures of the mountains and the people around him with surprising skill. Rebecca and Zachary grew together as well, their love deepening with time and shared experience. They had arguments, of course, over business decisions and child rearing and the thousand small disagreements that come with building a life together. But they always talked through their problems, always came back to the foundation of respect and love they had built. On their 10th anniversary in 1890, Zachary took Rebecca on a trip to Salt Lake City, leaving the children with a trusted neighbor. It was the first time they had been alone together in years, and it felt like a second honeymoon. They stayed in a proper hotel, attended a play, ate in restaurants, walked through parks, and remembered what it was like to be just Zachary and Rebecca, not parents or shopkeepers or community pillars, just two people in love. "Do you ever regret it?" Rebecca asked one evening as they walked along a tree-lined street. "Taking me in that day? You could have married someone with family connections, with money, with a dowry. Instead, you got a half-frozen stranger with nothing but a photograph." Zachary stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Rebecca, listen to me. That day, finding you in the snow, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. You brought light and warmth and purpose to my life. You gave me a family, a real partnership, love beyond anything I imagined possible. I would choose you 1,000 times over. Every time, without hesitation. I love you," Rebecca said simply. "More than I have words for. I love you too, more than life itself." They kissed there on the street, not caring who saw, and Rebecca felt the same flutter in her heart she had felt on their wedding day. Proof that love did not fade with time, but rather grew richer, deeper, more complex, and beautiful. The years continued their steady march. The children became teenagers, then young adults. James took over more of the store operations, showing a business acumen that impressed even his father. Sarah, despite her childhood declarations, became a teacher at the school, channeling her energy into education. Samuel moved to Salt Lake City to study art, his talent recognized by a patron who offered to sponsor his training. Rebecca watched her children grow with pride and a touch of melancholy. They were becoming independent, building their own lives as they should, but she missed the days when they were small, when her home was filled with noise and chaos and the constant demands of parenting. Zachary understood, feeling the same bittersweet mixture of pride and loss. "We did well," he said one evening, as they sat on the porch they had built onto the back of the store, watching the sunset paint the mountains. "They're good people, kind and honest and capable." "We did," Rebecca agreed. "But I'm not ready to be just grandparents yet." He laughed. "Neither am I, though James has been courting that banker's daughter from Salt Lake City. I suspect we'll have grandchildren before too long. And Sarah has half the single men in 3 counties hoping to catch her eye. Poor fools don't stand a chance. She'll choose when she's ready and not a moment before. She gets that stubbornness from you." Rebecca elbowed him gently. "From me? You're the most stubborn man I've ever met. Determined. I prefer determined." He took her hand, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles, a gesture he had performed 10,000 times over their years together. "Rebecca, there's something I've been thinking about." "What's that?" "The store. James can run it now. He's capable and interested. What if we stepped back? Not completely, but more. We could travel, see some of the country we've never seen. We could spend more time on things we enjoy. You've always wanted to see the ocean." Rebecca considered. She was 43 now, Zachary 46. They had worked hard for 20 years, building the store, raising their children, establishing themselves in Alta. The idea of stepping back, of having time just for themselves, was appealing. "I think I'd like that," she said slowly, "but only if James truly wants the responsibility. I won't force it on him." "He wants it." We've talked about it. He sees it as his future, his legacy. He wants to build on what we created. Then yes, let's do it. Let's see the ocean. They made the trip the following summer of 1895, traveling by train to San Francisco. It was a revelation. Rebecca had never seen anything like the city, so large and bustling and diverse. And the ocean, when they finally reached it, took her breath away. It stretched to the horizon, vast and wild and beautiful, waves crashing against the shore with power that was both terrifying and exhilarating. They walked along the beach, holding hands, shoes left behind on the sand. The water was cold when Rebecca waded in, soaking the hem of her skirt, but she did not care. She felt like a girl again, full of wonder and possibility. "Thank you for this," she said to Zachary, "for always giving me new experiences, new homes to hold. Thank you for being willing to hold them with me." They stayed in San Francisco for 2 weeks, exploring the city, eating foods they had never tasted, attending concerts and museums, and absorbing everything they could. Then they traveled north along the coast, stopping in small towns, meeting new people, seeing new landscapes. It was the adventure of a lifetime, made perfect by sharing it together. When they returned to Alta, Rebecca felt renewed. She had seen the wider world, but she knew with certainty that this small mountain town was where she belonged. Not because it was the only option, but because she chose it. Because this was where her family was, where her history lived, where she and Zachary had built something meaningful. James married his banker's daughter, Caroline, in 1896, and they gave Rebecca and Zachary their first grandchild, a boy named Zachary James, in 1897. Rebecca held her grandson and felt the circle of life complete itself. This baby would never know hunger or cold or abandonment. He would grow up surrounded by love and security and opportunity. This was what she and Zachary had built, not just a store or a home, but a legacy of love and stability that would carry forward through generations. Sarah married in 1899, choosing a fellow teacher named Robert, who matched her intelligence and shared her passion for education. They settled in Alta, both teaching at the school, and soon announced they were expecting. Samuel returned from Salt Lake City in 1900, having made a name for himself as an artist and opened a small studio in Alta where he painted and taught classes. He had not yet married, claiming he was married to his art, but Rebecca was not worried. He would find someone when the time was right. The new century brought changes. Automobiles began appearing on Utah roads, though Alta's mountain location kept them rare. Electricity came to the larger towns, though Alta remained mostly lit by lamp and candlelight. The world was transforming, becoming modern, but some things remained constant. Family, love, home. On their 20th anniversary in 1900, Rebecca and Zachary renewed their vows in a simple ceremony attended by their children and grandchildren. James gave his father's original ring back to him, polished to a shine. Zachary slipped it onto Rebecca's finger again, just as he had 2 decades before. "You walked through snow holding a photograph of a home you had lost," he said, echoing words he had spoken long ago. "I gave you a new home to hold. But really, Rebecca, you gave me the home. You made me understand that home isn't a place, it's a person. It's love, it's commitment. It's waking up every morning and choosing each other again." Rebecca was crying, as was half the gathered family. "You saved my life that day in the snow, but more than that, you gave me a reason to live. You showed me that loss doesn't have to be the end of the story, that there can be new beginnings, new love, new homes. I would walk through 1,000 snowstorms if I knew you were waiting at the end." They kissed to applause and cheers, and the celebration that followed was joyous and loud and full of the people they loved most. The years moved faster now, or perhaps Rebecca was simply more aware of their passage. She was in her 50s, then her 60s. Her hair turned gray, then white. Zachary's dark hair silvered as well, and he moved a bit slower, though his mind remained sharp and his love as steadfast as ever. They became fixtures in Alta, the couple who had been there forever, who represented stability and constancy in a changing world. More grandchildren came, 9 in total, filling the expanded house with noise and energy whenever they visited. Rebecca loved being a grandmother, loved the chance to love these children without the constant anxiety of parenthood, to simply enjoy them. She taught them to bake, to sew, to read. Zachary taught them mathematics, told them stories of the Old West, took them on walks through the mountains. In 1910, Alta celebrated its 50th anniversary as an official town, and the Irwins were honored for their contributions to the community. Rebecca stood beside Zachary as the mayor praised their generosity, their business acumen, their steadfast presence through boom and bust. She thought about that girl in the snow, desperate and alone, and marveled at how far she had come. That evening, she and Zachary sat on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill, watching their grandchildren play in the yard below. "Did you ever imagine this?" Rebecca asked. "All those years ago when you found me, I imagined hoping you would survive the night. Everything else has been better than anything I could have imagined. No regrets? Not a single one." He pulled her closer. "Well, maybe one. I wish I had found you sooner, that we had more years together. We have years still. Many years, I hope." "Many years," he agreed. "But however many we get, it won't be enough. I could have 1,000 lifetimes with you and still want more." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Zachary Thomas Irwin. Thank you for building me a home to hold. I love you, Rebecca Ann Irwin. Thank you for being that home." They sat together as the sun set and the stars emerged, as they had done 1,000 times before, and would do 1,000 times again. Around them, their family laughed and played, the legacy of their love made manifest. Inside, the photograph of that Ohio farmhouse sat in a place of honor, a reminder of where Rebecca had come from. But she no longer needed it to remember home. Home was right here, in the arms of the man who had saved her, who had loved her, who had given her everything. The snow began to fall, gentle flakes drifting down from the darkening sky, and Rebecca watched them settle on the ground. Once, snow had meant danger and desperation. Now it meant beauty and peace and the promise of winter fires and stories told to eager grandchildren. Everything had changed. Everything was exactly as it should be. Zachary squeezed her hand. "Cold? No, I'm perfect." "Yes," he said, kissing her temple. "You are." They stayed on the porch until the children were called inside, until the night grew too cold to ignore. Then they went into their home, the home they had built together, filled with warmth and light and love, and closed the door on the winter night. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Alta in white, but inside there was only warmth. Inside there was only home. The years continued their gentle progression. Rebecca and Zachary moved through their 70s, their bodies slower, but their spirits undimmed. They had stepped away from day to day, store operations entirely now, leaving it in James's capable hands. Their days were filled with family visits, reading, quiet walks when weather permitted, and the deep comfort of a partnership, tested and proven by time. In 1918, the world outside Alta was torn by war and the terrible influenza pandemic that swept the globe. Alta was not spared entirely, but the small community pulled together, helping those who fell ill, supporting grieving families, and somehow emerging battered but intact. The Irwin family was fortunate, all of them surviving, though some of the grandchildren's friends were not so lucky. Rebecca worked with other women in town to organize relief efforts, sewing masks, preparing food for sick families, using the organizational skills she had honed running the store for so many years. Zachary donated supplies from the store, refusing payment from those who could not afford it. They were old now, but not useless, and they contributed what they could. When the pandemic finally ended and the war concluded, Alta held a service of thanksgiving. Rebecca sat with Zachary in the church, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, and felt profound gratitude. They had survived so much: personal tragedies, economic hardships, illness, the simple challenge of building a life in a harsh place. And through it all, they had each other. In 1920, women gained the right to vote, and Rebecca cast her ballot with pride and emotion. She thought of the girl she had been, powerless and voiceless, dependent on the kindness or cruelty of others. That girl could never have imagined this moment, standing in a voting booth, exercising her voice in democracy. Progress was slow and imperfect, but it was real. Zachary celebrated with her, taking her to dinner in Salt Lake City, just the two of them. He was 86 now, moving carefully but still sharp and engaged. She was 83, her body worn but her mind clear. To my wife, Zachary toasted with water, as neither of them drank alcohol, who walked through snow and changed my life forever. To my husband, Rebecca responded, who gave me a home and a future and more love than I dreamed possible. They clinked their glasses, and Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks. Happy tears, grateful tears. She had lived a long life, longer than many of her generation. She had loved and been loved. She had raised good children and seen them raise good children in turn. She had built something lasting. That night, in their hotel room, Zachary held her close. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. She heard the seriousness in his tone. What is it? I'm 86 years old. I've had a wonderful life, better than I deserved. But I'm tired, love. My body is wearing out. I can feel it. Fear clutched at Rebecca's heart. Don't talk like that. You're fine. You're strong. I'm old, we both are, and that's all right. I've made my peace with it. He stroked her hair, white as snow now. But I need you to know that when my time comes, I'm ready. I'm not afraid. How could I be? I've lived a life so full of love and joy that death holds no terror. I'm not ready, Rebecca whispered. I can't lose you. You won't lose me. I'll always be with you in your memories, in our children, in everything we built together. And when it's your time, I'll be waiting. I promise. Rebecca clung to him, crying, and he held her until she calmed. They did not speak of it again that night, or in the days that followed. But Rebecca knew he was right. Time was catching up with them, and there was no outrunning it. Zachary passed peacefully in his sleep in the autumn of 1921, just shy of his 87th birthday. Rebecca woke beside him and knew immediately that he was gone. His face was peaceful, relaxed, as though he had simply decided it was time to rest. She held his hand still warm and said goodbye to the man who had been her partner for 41 years. The funeral was the largest Alta had ever seen. Zachary had touched countless lives through his fairness, his generosity, his quiet integrity. People came from neighboring towns to pay respects. The church overflowed, and speakers shared stories of his kindness, his business acumen, his devotion to family and community. Rebecca sat in the front pew, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and listened to them celebrate the man she had loved. She did not cry during the service. She had cried enough in private. Today was for remembering him as he had lived, strong, kind, steady. They buried him in the Alta cemetery, not far from Martha's grave. Rebecca stood at the graveside as the preacher spoke final words, and she placed a single wildflower on the casket, the same kind of flowers that had been in her hair on their wedding day. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me a home. I'll see you again. The months after Zachary's death were the hardest of Rebecca's life. She had been alone before, but never like this. Before, she had been alone with nothing. Now she was alone with everything, memories so thick they sometimes felt suffocating. The house felt empty without him. The store, though she rarely went there anymore, felt wrong without his presence. The whole world felt slightly off-kilter, as though a fundamental piece of the universe's structure had been removed. Her children worried about her. James wanted her to move in with him and Caroline. Sarah visited daily. Samuel came from Salt Lake City, and stayed for weeks. But Rebecca gently refused their assistance. She needed to find her way through this grief on her own, to learn how to exist in a world without Zachary. Slowly, painfully, she did. She found routine again, small purposes. She spent time with her grandchildren, now teenagers and young adults themselves. She worked in her garden. She volunteered at the school and the church. She read voraciously, losing herself in stories. And gradually the sharp edge of grief dulled to an ache she could live with. She remained in the house above the store, in the rooms she and Zachary had made into a home. James offered multiple times to buy her a proper house, something more modern and easier to maintain, but she refused. This was where she had been happy. This was where Zachary's presence still lingered. She would not leave it. On what would have been their 42nd anniversary, Rebecca took out the old photograph, the one she had clutched in the snow all those years ago. The edges were worn, the image faded, but she could still make out the farmhouse, the life that had been. She looked at it for a long time, then placed it back in its spot. Beside it, she placed a newer photograph, taken on their 40th anniversary. It showed her and Zachary, old and gray but smiling, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. This was her home now, captured in silver and paper. Not a place, but people. Love made visible. Rebecca lived another 7 years. She saw great-grandchildren born, watched Samuel finally marry a fellow artist, celebrated as Sarah was named principal of the school. She remained active and engaged, a respected elder in Alta, the woman who had arrived in a snowstorm and stayed to become part of the town's foundation. In the spring of 1928, at the age of 91, Rebecca caught a simple cold that her aging body could not fight off. She knew, as it settled into her lungs, that her time had come. She was not afraid. Zachary had been right about that. Death held no terror when you had lived fully and loved deeply. Her children gathered around her bed in those final days. She gave each of them private words, blessings, and advice and love. She told James she was proud of how he had grown the store, how he had maintained the integrity his father had established. She told Sarah she admired her strength and independence, how she had forged her own path. She told Samuel his art brought beauty to the world, and that was a gift beyond price. Her grandchildren visited, and she told them stories of their grandfather, of the early days in Alta, of what the world had been like when she was young. She wanted them to remember, to carry forward the legacy of love and hard work and kindness that she and Zachary had tried to build. On her last day, Rebecca asked to be alone for a while. Her family reluctantly agreed, gathering in the rooms beyond, waiting. Rebecca lay in the bed she had shared with Zachary for decades, looking at the photographs on the table, the old one from Ohio, the one from their anniversary, others collected over the years, capturing moments of joy and love and family. She closed her eyes and felt Zachary's presence, as real as though he sat beside her. She imagined his hand taking hers, his voice saying, "Ready? Ready," she whispered. Rebecca Ann Irwin, born Ashford, died peacefully, surrounded by love, secure in the knowledge that she had mattered, that she had built something lasting, that she had been truly, completely home. They buried her beside Zachary, their graves side by side, as they had been in life. The whole town attended, 3 generations of people whose lives had been touched by the Irwins. The preacher spoke of Rebecca's journey, from that desperate girl in the snow to the matriarch of a large and loving family, from lost to found, from alone to surrounded by love. James spoke at the funeral, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother taught us many things. She taught us resilience, that you can survive terrible loss and still build something beautiful. She taught us the value of hard work and honest dealing. She taught us that home is not a place, but the people you love. And she taught us, by example, that love is the greatest legacy we can leave." After the service, after the mourners had left, the Irwin family gathered at the house above the store. They sat in the rooms Rebecca and Zachary had made into a home, and they told stories, laughed at memories, cried for their loss. The photographs remained on the table, testament to lives well lived and love that transcended death. Years later, decades later, when the store had been passed to another generation and then another, when Alta had changed from mining town to ski resort, when the world had transformed in ways Rebecca could never have imagined, the story remained. The story of the woman who walked through snow holding a photograph of home and the cowboy who gave her a new home to hold. It was told to children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, a family legend, a love story for the ages. And in the telling and retelling, Rebecca and Zachary lived on, their love a beacon showing that even in the hardest times, even when all seems lost, there can be new beginnings, there can be hope, there can be home. The old photograph from Ohio eventually made its way to a descendant who became a historian, interested in family genealogy. She had it restored and preserved, along with the anniversary photograph and dozens of others. She created a family archive, documenting the journey from that snowstorm in 1879 to the present day, showing how one act of kindness, one moment of connection, had rippled forward through time to create an entire family tree. The store still stood in Alta, though it had been converted to other uses. A plaque near the door read, "Original site of Irwin General Store, established 1876, home to Zachary and Rebecca Irwin, whose love story began in a snowstorm and whose legacy of kindness and integrity shaped this community." And sometimes, when snow fell heavy on Alta, when winter winds howled through the mountains, people said they could feel it, the echo of that long ago moment when everything changed, when a desperate woman found hope, when a lonely man found love, when two people found each other and built a home that would last forever. That was the true legacy. Not the store, though it had prospered, not the money, though they had earned enough. Not even the children and grandchildren and all the generations that followed, though they were precious. The legacy was the love itself, the choice they made every day to build something together, to be each other's home. Rebecca had walked through snow holding a photograph of a home she had lost. Zachary had given her a new home to hold. But the truth, the beautiful truth, was that they had given each other that gift. They had built it together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. And what they built lasted not just their lifetimes, but far beyond, a testament to the enduring power of love, the possibility of new beginnings, and the simple, profound magic of finding someone who makes you feel like you have finally, truly come home.